Hey guys, NYC Geek Society again. John here with Axel.
That's me.
That's him. So we're here to talk about the panel that they had at E3 for Westworld, which was Jonathan Nolan, Lisa Joy, and Tom Bissell was interviewing them. Of course, Lisa Joy and Jonathan Nolan are both creators of Westworld, the TV series. And Tom Bissell, I believe, is a game writer, but he's mostly a journalist. So it was a very interesting interview. Some things, I'm just going to go down a list of my notes. Axel kind of was eating lunch most of the conference, so he didn't really get much.
I'm sorry, I was hungry after that Nintendo conference.
Yeah.
I mean, I lost a lot of energy looking at Smash Brothers.
But yeah, they said that, when they were planning the series, like the first season even, they planned out like the plot points of the world, like almost like an actual video game of like where these characters would be and what their narratives in the world would be. Like the hosts, basically, like Dolores and Teddy and all of them, like what their actual plots are in that world. So I find that interesting. Like, I wonder, I don't know, I've never looked at, like, their website or anything, if you could read about stuff like that. Have you ever?
No, I've never been on their website.
I wonder if that's...
it was interesting what they were saying about the NPC characters, or even, like, where you start out in Westworld is, like, the safe place. The green, like, the Green Hill Zone of Sonic the Hedgehog or something.
Right, like, everyone starts at the same place, or you can go to the bars, and you can kind of just, like, take it easy. And they said, like, really it's the geography of that world that makes things more difficult. Like, the further out you go.
The missionary position part.
Yeah, that's what Jonathan Nolan said. Says the missionary position. Yeah. But one thing that I found interesting is that they said that, in this world, and kind of the same in video games, or especially open world games, is that you could write everything but the protagonist of the story, because the protagonist is a gamer, and so like it's kind of an interesting challenge, really. You
can write everything.
Yeah, like in video games, like when you're playing Grand Theft Auto or Red Dead Redemption, it's kind of interesting that the writers at that game, they have some control over what the protagonist does in like cutscenes and stuff, but you don't know what the main person is going to be doing, because that's the player.
Yeah, so it's kind of just showing you the protagonist from a third-person perspective, which I guess has never really been done before.
Yeah, well, what do you mean by that? What do you mean by third-person perspective?
Maybe I'm thinking about it too hard, but like it's almost like watching... Well, it's kind of like watching somebody else play a video game, right? Like me watching you playing Resident Evil, I'm like, what are you doing?
Right, and you have like no control over it.
Yeah.
But what's interesting too is like, I mean, I guess this is kind of what game writers do too, is like they said that in writing out like the host's plots, they would write out different possibilities of like, if this happens here and this happens here, then these two characters will eventually meet up here again, like... I found that kind of fascinating. They seem to have a lot of respect for Ken Levine and the BioShock series. Yeah. Obviously influenced by Red Dead Redemption as well, and like Grand Theft Auto. It was kind of interesting, like them talking about their first experiences playing GTA. Where Lisa Joy said, like, she ran over a pedestrian and saw her like hobbling away. She's like, "Oh, I wonder if she has health insurance."
I don't think like that.
Well, but it's interesting, like,
I'm an awful person.
They kind of go into, like, originally you have, like, that initial shock, and then you kind of get that, that kind of goes away, And, as games get more and more realistic and it becomes harder to differentiate that from reality.
Yeah, like, Jonathan mentioned, Jonathan at the show mentioned, Jonathan Nolan, he mentioned that, we have, like, two morality complexes, like, one in-game and one in real life.
Right.
And now that games are kind of getting closer and closer to, like, photorealism and and just like the pure immersion of the entire thing, like going into VR, who knows what's gonna happen next? Maybe it's gonna be a return of smell-o-vision. I don't know.
Well, that was interesting too, because he said like even that right now we only use 2 senses, sight and sound, really.
Mhm.
But as things evolve, we'll probably have touch and smell and taste, and when that happens.
Oh my god. Who knows?
Yeah.
Yeah, who knows the kind of people that will become.
Yeah, because they were talking about when they first tried the HTC Vive, and then they took it off, and they said it was kind of like a reality shock, like kind of like.
They said that like reality was boring.
Yeah.
After being in there,
and they were driving home with their daughter, and they were thinking like, "Wow, well, this is like very shortly going to be in her life. Like most of her life, she will have grown up with virtual reality being a thing."
Mhm.
And they were wondering like what that world would be like for her.
I don't know. I mean, it's kind of like how we are with the internet right now. Who would have imagined all this information at our fingertips? So now we're kind of now we're the ones scared for our children going into the VR world because we just don't know what's gonna happen. But
Yeah.
I think the human race is more than capable of figuring its way out of things. What do you think?
Again, it just always goes back to that Jurassic Park question of so busy thinking about whether they could, they didn't think about if they should. And like that's been a big discussion in the world of like, as technology gets more and more advanced, morality doesn't.
Yeah, I remember you talking about this. Like we upgrade. This is a quote from you. We upgrade our technology, but we don't upgrade our morality. It's kind of been the same.
Well, it didn't originate with me, but I've been listening to conversations.
John is a god, and he knows everything.
Something that I found interesting too is what they were talking about. How as a game writer, like they were imagining when they were writing the show, what it must be like for the creators. Where like for example Bernard or Arnold, training Dolores and helping create her, and you develop an attachment to these characters, and then you have to then put them out into the world where people are going to like rape and kill and hurt them, and they said that they think it's probably similar actually, that feeling of actual video game creators, yeah, because it's not like with like a movie or a TV show where you have full control over what happens to them.
Yeah, Jonathan Nolan mentioned like the filming industry is this autonomous, totalitarian thing. Yeah, a totalitarian society where you're just like, yeah, you go here, you do this. Whereas in video games, well, obviously, players have the choice to fuck up your creations. Yeah.
Where they brought up that scene, I think, in the first season where Hector was like this bad guy. It's supposed to give this big speech, and then he just gets like stabbed in the neck or something. The writer sitting there like, oh man, like that big speech.
And they were like nitpicking his speech, like, trying to think of the exact words. But we're just gonna kill him. Why does it matter?
Oh man! But one of the most fascinating things that they spoke of, I connected to because I've said this before as well. Like one of the reasons why I like video games is that I feel like as a person that's not very religious, I don't see the real world as having meaning. I believe more in chaos. I don't necessarily believe that there's destiny in the traditional sense of the word.
John's an anarchist.
I'm not an anarchist. I'm agnostic. But in video games, there's meaning. That everything that you see in that world was specifically put there by somebody. And designed by somebody and made by people. And so, because they were asking a question about the Man in Black, right? And they were saying, like, he's kind of the ultimate gamer. And why has he been coming back to this world for decades now? And Lisa Joy was saying because he's looking for meaning. You know, he desperately wants meaning in this flawed world. And so he's looking for it there because the real world doesn't have it. The real world is chaos.
So that's kind of like you with The Last of Us.
Well, just kind of in every game, you know, like I look for meaning and there's meaning to be found. Whereas in real life, you could look for meaning and there really, in my mind, there really isn't any, you know? Like a tree is just, if you're in the woods and
well, you could talk to people and you'll learn life lessons.
Yeah, but
I think that's kind of the same thing in video games. You're
not really. I mean, because like
you're gaining perspective.
Yeah, but a video game is kind of designed, you know, and there's a story that was planned out. You know, whether you decide to participate in that story or not, and obviously, like some games have less story than others, but in real life, I don't believe that there's anything planned out. It's just chaos. There's no like at the end of your life. You're not necessarily going to have some sort of revelation about things, you know? A lot of people are just going to die and never really understand anything, you know?
So are you saying just because, like, video games have, like, a solid, like, beginning and ending, that there's more perspective to be gained from that, whereas life is sort of just chaotic and then it's over?
Right. And, you know, it's interesting because they talked a little bit more about that, about, like, you know... People seem to think that they want free will in video games and want all their choices to really matter. But do they really? You know, because, you know, like people were mad at like BioShock for the ending of Mass Effect 3, that all of their decisions didn't, you know, culminate in
Wait, mad at BioShock for...
I mean, BioWare. Sorry. I mean, the guys at BioWare, you know, for the Mass Effect series. But... You know, in reality, you're also kind of looking for meaning, you know, that you want your story to have weight, to play out in a certain way, or to make sense, you know? Whereas if really all your choices mattered and affected everything...
So games are designed to make sense, but real life... Well, isn't.
Right. Like what I always think of, it, you know, video game. I feel like what makes a really great video game designers is if the player feels like that they decided to do something and it was completely of their own free will, but it's actually what the game designer really wanted you to do. And what I always think of is when I was playing through Half-Life 2. I've only played through it once, so my memories are a little faded now, but I remember thinking like, you know, I was in like this big open space. I'm like, I guess I'll go this way. And I found like some cottage and then like all of these bad guys showed up and I was shooting them, which then led me to kind of run away and go another direction. And I was going like all over the place. And then somehow I ended up at a story point. And I'm like, how did they funnel me into this? Because like to me, it just seemed like I was just reacting to things and running away and kind of just making these choices on the whim, but I ended up coming back to the story.
It's like they did all the math already for you, but I don't know, it's just too much for you to recognize.
Like in hindsight, I'm like, well, I bet you no matter where you go, you end up at this one point. But, you know, in the moment, it felt like it was just so natural.
Which game was this?
Half-Life 2.
Half-Life 2. Oh, I haven't played that much.
But really, that's, again, still designated as one of the best video games of all time. Because of stuff like that, you know? And so, you know, it's kind of interesting how they thought of that in Westworld, you know, and, you know, why is it that we like video games so much? And I think part of it,
it's
at least for me...
It's the illusion of free choice, or free will?
Well, the illusion of free choice in order to have meaning. You know, with free will, like, you don't have meaning. If everything is just, you know, chaos. But if there is a destiny, if there is something...
So the illusion of choice brings meaning?
Yeah.
It's an interesting... I don't know, it's just an interesting way to think about things.
I mean, it's kind of the game designer is kind of guiding the player along to arrive at a certain point.
You don't feel trapped, but at least you know that there's an ending
right
in sight.
And you're being guided, gently to this point that the writer wants you to get to,
But you don't feel constrained
right.
at the same time. You feel like you naturally... That's cool.
Right.
You feel like you naturally went there.
Which kind of plays into what Lisa Joy later said, too, where she was talking... They were asking about, are you afraid of, the evolution of AI? And they were talking about, they were saying like how
we're AI, not that smart.
Yeah, well, that the AI isn't there. Like we're afraid of them taking over, but really, like Google just knows how to like call your hairdresser and arrange an appointment, and so it's not actually that smart as we thought it might be. But she said also humans might not be as smart because she was saying like humans could kind of
because we're prone to psychological warfare, and those are the hacks that get into our
and
our head.
It's kind of not that hard to do,
no.
And kind of that is what good game designers do. They kind of make you think that it was your choice to do certain things, but it wasn't.
That's psychological warfare.
Well, not warfare.
All right, maybe I'm being a little dramatic.
But it's manipulative, but in order to kind of get to a point where there's meaning, I found that very fascinating. They had some conversations of like...
Artificial stupidity.
Oh, yeah, that's kind of just hard. But like, their daughter is playing like moose math, and they're trying to think of like how to introduce her to... how they're going to introduce her to, bigger video games.
Or she could just stick with Moose Math. AAA game right there.
Another thing kind of related to what we were talking about with meaning, and, I like that they were talking about kind of binaries and what's, typically we think of good and bad. But a lot of great video games that come out, where she had this great quote where she said, Lisa Joy said, "You don't get to be a god without any kind of weakness, and you don't get to be a devil without any kind of light." And I'm like, that's like such a beautiful quote.
I think that was the quote of that conference.
Yeah, that was so beautiful.
Besides artificial stupidity, that was like one of my favorites.
So yeah, Tom Bissell was like saying that it's kind of annoying that we still have to refer to them as video games and not like something else because, we're kind of stuck with that term game and we're stuck with win states but really video games aren't really about that anymore, or a lot of them aren't.
It's about an experience.
I thought it was interesting how he said like, stop saying I beat that game and say I finished it, I don't know, it's kind of...
For God's sake.
Interesting. Yeah, I think that pretty much sums up... they were talking about at the end, like, in 30 years, if there's a world like Westworld, will you go to it? And Jonathan was like, yeah, I'll go. And she's like, who are you going to go with? Like, I don't want to go there. So that was pretty cute and funny. But yeah, that pretty much sums it up. So we're going to, again, be covering more of these panels throughout the day. We're going to take a little bit of a break, so we're not going to cover every panel because otherwise we'd be working nonstop till like 10 p.m. But, stay tuned. Like, share, subscribe.
And hit the bell.
And NYC Geek Out.
Geek out.